Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dadi Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dadi Girivara Dadi Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Jasodhanandana Brajajanandana Jamunatira Vanachadi Jamunatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivijagacharya Astatara Satasri Srimad Divine Grace Easy Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. This evening, we're just going to be discussing one verse, but we're going to go in some depth with this one verse. The section of the Bhagavatam we're discussing, Canto 10, Chapter 14, it's Brahma's prayers up to text number 40. And then we'll switch topics when we get to text after text 40. A little background to get us to text 33. Chapter 13, little 3-minute summary. Chapter 13 is Brahma is paying a visit to Vrindavan. And that very day that he visits is the day that Krishna kills the Aghasura demon, and you saw the whole thing happen. And he goes, wow, that was really cool. That was amazing, the potency of the personality of Godhead. After Aghasura was killed, the cowherd boys took a lunch break. So they're sitting together, Krishna in the center, the cowherd boys in a circle around him, and the calves grazing nearby because they're young, because not yet herding cows, it's still the calves. Brahma became curious to understand the limit of Krishna's potencies. He has mystic powers, Brahma, so he did what he did. He took the calves and then came back and took the cowherd boys and put them in a cave and went back to see what Krishna would do. Our acharyas say he was thinking, when he sees me, maybe Krishna will cry and think, Brahma, the calves and cowherd boys are gone. Please help me. What's Krishna going to do? Because he's looking at him like a little boy. Now he's the most intelligent person in the universe. That is to say, he became covered by Krishna's potency so that he wouldn't recognize. Something like Arjuna became covered so he wouldn't recognize. what his duty was. So Krishna manifested from himself identical forms of each cowherd boy and each calf. So when Brahma came back to see what's Krishna going to do, that's what he saw. All the calves and all the cowherd boys. So he went back in the cave and there's all the calves and the cowherd boys. So what's going on? So when he went back to see what Krishna would do next, Krishna simultaneously manifested the same forms of the cowherd boys and simultaneously forms of Narayan, surrounded by all of the unlimited potencies of each form of Narayan, personified Vedas and the Devas and everyone singing Krishna's praises, worshipping him as a big concert, big sound. And then Krishna manifested universes for each of the forms of Narayan, which was each of the forms of the calves and cowherd boys. So many universes. And then, poof, they all disappeared. And just left standing was Krishna, with unblinking eyes, holding some yogurt and rice in his hand, looking at Brahma. Brahma fell flat, offered obeisances again and again, and stood, and that's the beginning of chapter 14. He offered prayers. So his prayers cover many subject matters, so I'm not going to summarize them. But there's a section that begins with text 31. Text 30, Krishna is asking him, now that you understand me, and you understand the unlimitedness of my potencies, just ask something, whatever it is that you like. And his one request, his one remaining desire, is to be engaged in Krishna's service and be in his association of his devotees, life after life. And then, according to our acharyas, he takes a plunge into Braja Prem and speaks 31, 32, and we ended up last night, 33, this one. He's just first he honors the Nanda Maharaj and the Vatsalya Rasa residents of Braja. And then he honors the Sakya Rasa residents of Vrindavan and all the residents of Vrindavan, appreciating their great fortune. Indirectly, he's hinting, but he's not feeling qualified to say, I'd like to take birth in Vrindavan and be one of your eternal associates. Qualified to say, I'd like to become associated with you that way in Vrindavan. But he doesn't feel that's right that he asks that. Qualified to say, I'd like to become associated with you that way. So he just praises, but he doesn't feel that's right that he asks that. Be engaged and I become associated with you. So he just praises, but he doesn't feel that's right that he asks that. Be engaged and I become associated with you. So he just praises, but he doesn't feel that's right that he asks that. Be engaged and I become associated. So he just prays, but he doesn't feel reads, and yet engaged in argument. Even though the extent of good fortune of these residents yet engaged in argument. Even though the extent of good fortune of these residents yet engaged in argument. Even though also the extent of good fortune, because the senses of these devotees of Vrindavan are the cups through which we repeatedly drink the nectarian intoxicating beverage of the honey of your lotus feet. So we discussed the commentary for this verse yesterday. I'll just summarize some points. The demigods have a function in relation to the senses and sense objects and perceiving the sense objects. And that function is, without the assistance, without the empowerment of the senses to perceive sense objects. The senses may be there and the objects are there, but they can't perceive anything. They have a function to play. They're presiding deities of the senses that enable the senses to do what senses are meant to do, perceive and interact with sense objects. So these 11 are those personalities, the demigods, who have that function. And we'll cover some points on this, but the demigods are in this physical or material plane. And the residents of Vrindavan, they appear to be in the physical or material plane, but they have spiritual forms. That's what's discussed in the commentary. And that means they have spiritual senses. So they, with their spiritual senses, can perceive, not just see, but experience the nectar of Krishna through their spiritual senses. So their spiritual senses can directly experience Krishna in his fullness, and those that do not have spiritual senses cannot. They can see, like Kamsa could see Krishna, but he couldn't see Krishna. He saw something else. Or the washerman, he saw Krishna, but he couldn't see Krishna because he didn't have spiritualized senses. But the residents of Vrindavan, they have spiritual forms, and through their senses, the demigods can experience Krishna, the intoxicating beverage of the honey of your lotus feet. So the Brijvasis are very fortunate, and they enable the 11 controlling deities or demigods presiding over the senses to experience what they're experiencing. They give them that gift. They give them that benediction. So this whole discussion this evening is just on this one verse, where understanding what's being said here, over there on the left, there's the demigods headed by Lord Brahma that are approaching Lord Vishnu at the shore of the Milk Ocean as he's lying on the bed of Anantashesha, appealing for him to take birth. That's where that painting comes from. But there's some further function besides Brahma being the firstborn living being that creates the universe, and Brahma being the head of our sampradaya, receiving transcendental knowledge. There's this other function that's in relation to the universe, once it is established, and it has some connection with universal form and Sankhya philosophy. And universal form is not easy to understand. I don't know if you've had that experience, but it's not easy to understand. And then Sankhya philosophy is a little puzzling too. It's a little easier to understand. But they fit together, Sankhya philosophy. So we're going to read a section from Sankhya chapter, Canto 3, chapter 26, Kapila speaking to Devahuti, Sankhya philosophy, and what the function of the demigods in Sankhya philosophy, and what's the function of the demigods in relation to the universal form and Sankhya philosophy. So it's just some background so we can understand what Brahma is saying to Krishna here. In the Vedic picture of reality, there's this universal form has 3 different categories of descriptions of the universal form. One of those is something that's perceived by somebody, like Arjuna perceived the universal form. There's a whole chapter in Bhagavad Gita. Or another is Mother Yasoda looks inside Krishna's mouth and sees the whole universe within Krishna's mouth. And in Mahabharata, when the scene is there, Krishna is going as the peace messenger and Duryodhana wants to annihilate Krishna. Krishna shows a a partial manifestation of the universal form. So that's a category where persons see and experience the universal form. Another, second category is just by description. One doesn't see it, but it's narrated by a qualified person that understands it, like as found in Srimad Bhagavatam, where Maharaj Parikshit is hearing from Shukadeva Goswami in 3 different places, Canto 2, Canto 3, and Canto 5, description of the universal form. And then a third is those that are simply imagined. And there are lots of imagining people out there. So there's these 3 categories. Now, what this statement here, this slide, is the basis of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, one of the Bhaktivedanta Institute members, explaining the Vedic planetarium. Because Prabhupada, the celebrated letter that Prabhupada wrote to Swarup Damodar Maharaj, saying he wanted the Bhaktivedanta Institute and PhDs and other people to study 5th canto very carefully and show in 3 dimension how the 5th canto explains certain things about the universe. And in the 5th canto section, starting at the very beginning and repeated at the very end, it says, Sukadeva Goswami says, this is a description of the universal form. Though the temple of Vedic planetarium is the universal form. So the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam is of the second category, the sound form depiction of Vedic cosmology. And this is many devotees, most devotees in ISKCON are familiar with this poster that's depicting, according to the 5th canto, and the Vedic planetarium is depicting the structure of one universe. And that's what Vedic cosmology is, that's what 5th canto is. So it's that second type. So now back to the verse. Yet, even though the extent of the good fortune of those residents of Vrindavan is inestimable or inconceivable, we 11 presiding deities of the various senses, headed by Lord Shiva, are also most fortunate, because the senses of these devotees of Vrindavan are the cups through which we repeatedly drink the nectarian, intoxicating beverage of the honey of your lotus feet. That's the verse once again. And we're going to now take a look, attempt at least, the practical application of what this verse is addressing through Vedic authority. So these 11 devatas, or presiding deities of the senses, here's the list, and they're found in Canto 3, Chapter 26. So how it works is, only when these presiding deities sanction can the senses do what senses are meant to do, that is, experience sense objects. So I'm going to I've read this section many times and kind of like get puzzled, and then read it again and get puzzled and read it again, like I move on to the next section because it's puzzling. But it's from what Brahma is saying here, I spent some time and it's becoming less puzzling. So I'd like to read, starting from text 24. Now this is Sankhya philosophy, so it's like kind of dry, but it's how the universe comes into being. The universal form rises from the causal ocean. the Garbhodak ocean. So that picture of the universe, there's the planets up above, but that's half the universe, 14 planetary systems, etc. The bottom half is the Garbhodak ocean. And the universal form rises from the Garbhodak ocean. But before it rises from the Garbhodak ocean, some other things happen. That's the Sankhya philosophy part. The material ego, so this is the creation. Mahavishnu glances over Pradhan. Pradhan means the undifferentiated totality of material energy. Like a big warehouse that's all jumbled up. And it's just Krishna's external energy. His Chaya Devi. It's just undifferentiated totality of material energy. And the glance of Mahavishnu sends Brahma Devi from within Mahavishnu, entrusts the totality of living entities to that glance, known as Shambhu, and the time energy. So time, living entities, and accompanying living entities is not yet manifested their swabhava, their tendencies. Brahma karma swabhavajam, Kshatriya karma swabhavajam, Vaishya karma swabhava. Swabhava means tendency. And time. So time, swabhava, and karma that hasn't yet come into play because time energy has been withdrawn. So zoom, there goes the living entities. They contact Pradhan, and in contact with the living entities and the time energy, the Pradhan becomes agitated, like impregnation, and the elements that were undifferentiated start to differentiate out, separate out. So this element goes here, that element goes there. So the first element that differentiates out from Pradhan is false ego. Before we even have a body, false ego's got us. The material ego springs up from the Mahatattva, which evolved from the Lord's own energy. The material ego is endowed predominantly with active power of three kinds: goodness, passion, and ignorance. It is from these three types of material ego that the mind, the senses of perception, the organs of action, and the gross elements evolve. So those of you that know Sankhya philosophy, there's a total of how many elements? 24. So 5 plus 5 plus 5 generally equals 15. 5 knowledge acquiring senses, 5 working senses, 5 elements, and then there's another 5 as the objects of sense. That makes 20. Then there's mind, intelligence, and false ego, and then the other element is Mahatattva. That's 24. So this is Sankhya. The threefold Ahankar, the source of the gross elements, the senses and the mind, is identical with them because it is their cause. It is known by the name Sankarshan, who is directly Lord Ananta with 1,000 heads. The false ego is characterized as the doer, as an instrument, as an effect. Modes of nature. It is characterized as serene, active, and dull according to how it is influenced by the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. From false ego of goodness, another transformation takes place. This evolves the mind, whose thoughts and reflections give rise to desire. It goes on, it's like a long section. So the elements unfold, and there's presiding deities of those. The mind of the living entity is known by the name Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. He possesses a bluish-black form resembling a lotus flower growing in the autumn. He is found slowly by the yogis. By transformation of the false ego in passion, intelligence takes birth. The functions of intelligence are to help in ascertaining the nature of objects when they come into view, and to help the senses. There's more details. Egoism and passion produces two kinds of senses, knowledge-acquiring and working senses, etc., and they depend on intelligence for functioning. When egoism and ignorance is agitated, the subtle element of sound is manifested, and from sound comes the ethereal sky and the sense of hearing. So, without all the details, there's unfolding from subtle to gross. So then we have all these elements. And then come the demigods. So I'm going to skip some pages. Although it connects to these presiding deities. Characteristics of water, characteristics of fire, the characteristics of earth, etc. The sense whose object of perception is sound is called the auditory sense, and that whose object of perception is touch is called the tactile sense. The senses, the sense whose object of perception is form. The distinctive characteristic of fire is the sense of sight. Now these are subtle. This is before there's eyeballs. It's before there's a sense organ. It's the sense of sight, the sense of touch, the sense of smell. Finally, the sense whose object of perception is odor. The distinctive characteristic of earth is called the sense of smell. Since the cause exists in the effect as well, the characteristic of the former is observed in the latter. When all these elements were unmixed, that's the pradhan stage, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of creation, along with time, karma, and guna, entered into the universe with the total material energy in 7 divisions. From these 7 principles roused into activity and united by the presence of the Lord, an intelligent, unintelligent egg arose, from which appeared the celebrated Virat. So there's the Sankhya, the 24 elements are laid out, and the principles of creation are there, and then arises the Virat coming out of all of them. This universal egg, or the universe in the shape of an egg, is called the manifestation of material energy. Its layers, there's 7 layers. That's what those 7 principles are. Each layer is 10 times bigger, etc. Within this egg is the universal form of Lord Hare, of whose body the 14 planetary systems are parts. Now, there's lots of purports and lots of details. I'm just trying to give the picture of what Brahma is saying. What's his function once the universe is coming into being? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Virat Purusha, situated himself in that golden egg, which was lying on the water. That's the causal ocean. And he divided it into many departments. First of all, a mouth appeared in him, the Virat. Then came forth the organ of speech, and so on and so forth. A pair of nostrils appeared, and in them the sense of smell, the olfactory sense. In the wake of the olfactory sense came the wind god. So that's where these demigods, presiding deities of the senses, without which the senses can't perceive or experience sense objects. Thereafter, a pair of eyes, this is the universal form, a pair of eyes appeared in the universal form, and in them the sense of sight. In the wake of this sense came the sun god, who presides over it. So now it's listing the 11 deities presiding over the senses. So let's go back to the Sankhya. There's 24, but of the 24, there's 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, 5 working senses. That's 10. Then the mind is this 11th sense, the intelligence and ego. That makes 13. 5 plus 5 plus mind, intelligence, and ego, 13. So how does it become 11? In the commentary that we read yesterday, and it's in the BBT commentary as well, there's 2 that are left out because they're vulgar. The anus and the genital, those are 2 working senses, so you reduce the 2 from the 13, it becomes 11. The 11, we 11 presiding deities over the senses. That this is the senses of the universal form, or the subtle senses, not the eyeball and the earlobe and the tongue in your mouth. This is the sense, the subtle sense. They're presiding deities over them. And, it goes through the whole thing, the picture of the universal form, with all these senses and presiding deities of the senses and the sense objects and the elements. We're ready to go. But nothing's happening. They, the presiding deities of the senses, can't do anything without the sanction of the personality of Godhead. So now we're going to take a look. This verse, 10:14:33, expands upon the unfolding of the universe as found in Canto 3, Chapter 26, which includes the roles of the demigods in this unfolding process and the demigods' dependence on Paramatma to perform their respective functions. So Agni presides over the organ of speech. You can count them, there's 11 of them. Vayu presides over the olfactory sense. That's 2. Surya presides over the sense of sight, described here in chapter 26. The Devatas preside over the auditory sense. That's the protectors of the 10 directions. The Ashvinis preside over the touch sensation. Indra is the deity presiding over the hands. The presiding deity of movement, locomotion, legs. Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. The moon is the presiding deity of the mind. Brahma is the presiding deity of intelligence. And Lord Shiva is the presiding deity of false ego. Now, the demigods are there ready to go. The sensors are there, the sense objects are there ready to go, but nothing's happening because they can't do anything. So it describes, there's details. They try to wake up the Virat Rupa, nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. Each one, verse by verse, each tries, nothing happens. And then it starts to happen. The Virat Rupa, the universal form, was not becoming aroused. He had a mouth, he had eyes, but he wasn't doing anything. The senses weren't operative. And then, good news. The Supersoul, Vasudeva, presiding over consciousness, entered. And then the text reads, when the inner control of the deity presiding over consciousness entered the heart of the universal form with reason, at that very moment the cosmic being, the Virat Rupa, arose from the causal waters. The causal waters in this case means the Garbhodak ocean. The universe rose. It was there in a subtle but not yet active position. These are all steps, the Vedic picture of creation and the cosmic manifestation. This is Canto 3's description. Canto 5 gives the whole picture. Once Virat Rupa is aroused, here's what it looks like. Again, at the very beginning, when Maharaj Parikshit asks, could you describe this universe? You spoke about it. Could you give some details? And the reply he gets is, this is the Virat Rupa, and I'm going to describe it. You can't describe it completely in a lifetime of Brahma, but I'll give you its essential principles of the Virat Rupa. And then at the end he says, now I've described the Virat Rupa. So the point being, Vedic cosmology is the universal form. And the 11 presiding deities of the senses, they have a function in the universal form. They preside over the senses. There's the Garbhodak ocean at the bottom half. There's Bhumandal at the middle section. And that circle around, that's the Brahmanda. It's mentioned in this chapter 26, the coverings of the universe, 7 in number. Brahma speaks this message in the chapter that we're reading, now we're going back to chapter 14. Sri Krishna's eternal associates, that's the Brijbasis, independently experience the Lord's form and sound by their own spiritual senses without any influence of the mundane demigods. Now this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, where Brahma is making this assertion in this verse 33. That's from his commentary. Now, back to the usual. The usual is the presiding deities, they receive power from the Supreme Lord to do what they do, which is give strength and capacity to the senses to do what they do. If the demigods withdraw their power, the senses can't do what they're supposed to do. Like somebody's deaf, somebody's blind. The organ may be fine. It's possible the organ is broken also. But if the organ is fine, if the power of sense is withdrawn, they can't perceive. You can't hear, you can't see, you can't smell, you can't taste, you can't feel. The body becomes numb if the power of sense is withdrawn by the demigods. But the demigods can't do what their thing is without the empowerment of Paramatma, or the Supersoul, or Vasudeva, the Lord of Consciousness. That's the Vedic picture. And even when things are functioning, supposing somebody's tasting something or seeing something or smelling something, the demigods aren't experiencing that. They're giving the capacity of the sense to perceive or experience the objects. But in the case of the Brijbasis, their senses are fully spiritual. So they can experience Krishna directly without the assistance of the demigods. But the demigods are feeling, wow, they're so fortunate. But their good fortune is being passed on to us because they're allowing us or enabling us or transferring their capacity to us so we can also experience what they're experiencing. That's what's being said in this section. And then the last part is this very same verse, 10, 14, 33, is mentioned in Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Brihat Bhagavatamrita is a book by Sanatana Goswami that's in one sense it's a commentary on the Bhagavatam. And he's appreciating the residents of Vrindavan. Referring to this verse, he expresses that the demigods have deep appreciation for the Vrajvasis' conscious application of the faculties provided to them by creation. They also have senses. And the way that it's described there, the Vrajvasis use their egos to identify themselves as servants of Krishna. They use their intelligence to make up their minds to always act for his satisfaction. They're engaging their senses exclusively in Krishna's service. They use their eyes to see him. They use their tongues to chant his name. They use their ears to hear his glories. And the Vrajvasis are constantly utilizing their senses to receive and express their love for Krishna. Nice graphics, huh? And this is the last slide here. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is saying, here's Brahma over here, in this verse, we, the 11 presiding deities of the senses, are experiencing Krishna's sweetness through the 11 senses of the inhabitants of Vraja. And Jiva Goswami comments, making our senses such as the eye into cups, we also directly, repeatedly drink the sweet nectar from your lotus feet. So, Brahma, we just covered this verse. He is the creator of the universe. And once it's created, he has a function within the universe. It's not so often spoken about. It's spoken about in this verse. He is a presiding deity of intelligence. And he has a function. Intelligence doesn't work unless Brahma gives capacity to the intelligence to work. And Brahma can't do that without the personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, empowering and entering into the universal form and giving him the capacity to do what he can do, and all the other presiding deities of the senses, the 11. They derive their capacity from the Supreme Lord, and therefore the senses can do what senses can do. And then there's sense organs, but we require the empowerment of these devatas, controllers of the senses. But they, as powerful as they are within the whole of the creation, they are feeling themselves very grateful to the residents of Vrindavan, because the residents of Vrindavan don't need the demigod. The residents of Vrindavan can perceive Krishna directly, and through they give their mercy to these 11 presiding deities, so they can also experience through the 11 senses the nectar of Krishna's lotus feet, his form, his qualities, and everything. So they're most exalted. Now, there's only 7 more verses in this chapter of his prayers, but what he's getting at in the course of these prayers is he has enormous appreciation, regard, respect, love for the residents of Vrindavan. He's going to ask, just as Uddhava did, to become a blade of grass, so that the lotus feet of Krishna will give him some particles of dust on his grass head, his body, and be benedicted that way. Because the residents of Vrindavan, he doesn't feel eligible to ask, can I be one of them? Just a blade of grass. It's such an amazing place, far beyond anything of the topmost person in the universe, who builds the universe, and etc., etc., all of his capacities. It's nothing compared to the Brijvasis. He understands it. And is glorifying them. So, I normally don't go into a topic like this with such detail, but I've become interested in the universal form. Just a little how that happened. About a month ago, I was going to India, and I was going to India via Los Angeles. There was a nonstop flight. So I was at the LA temple for the morning class, and they were covering Canto 2, Chapter 1. In Canto 2, Chapter 1, it's the beginning part of an answer to the primary question of the Bhagavatam. Shukadeva Goswami is being asked by Maharaj Parikshit, what's the duty of a man who's about to die? And what does that subject matter that he should always hear, chant, and remember? So it begins that Shukadeva Goswami doesn't start speaking until Canto 2. And in Chapter 1, the first part is the universal form. So that was the topic that they were covering in the LA Bhagavatam class. So I spoke on the verse that was assigned to me. And I certainly have read it before and studied it before and spoken it before, but it's just, having been involved in Krishna consciousness for a few years now, it took on some special meaning, a little different meaning than in the past. And then one of the devotees that spoke after me lives in Los Angeles. His name is Dhruta Karma. You familiar with Dhruta Karma? He's a member of the BI, and so a YouTube video of his class was forwarded to me because it was profound. And he spoke these three different types of the Virat Rupa that are known, because there's lots of different pictures of the Virat Rupa, and it's confusing. It's difficult to understand. So hearing that, I became interested to understand more about the universal form and Vedic cosmology, and because it's important. Prabhupada wanted the world to have this showcased at the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, so that people could see that, why he wanted them to see it. So for the past month, maybe more, following that, I was spending an hour to 3 hours every day trying to understand Vedic cosmology. And you can't understand Vedic cosmology without understanding universal form. And you can't understand the universal form without understanding Sankhya philosophy, just as we read. And then when I read, so discussing these verses of Brahma's prayers, which are very wonderful, very, very important, when I came across this verse, it kind of hit my button. I had to, what is he saying? Who's the 11 presiding deities of the senses? We're not used to hearing that. What does that have to do with everything? So that prompted me to go more deeply into this subject. What Prabhupada explains about the importance of the universal form is it purifies the mind and the intelligence, enabling us to see the world around us in relation to the personality of Godhead from whom this world comes, and then enables us to better understand his original impersonal feature. So it's not an easy topic to understand. But Krishna's form is also not easy to understand. In one of the prayers that Brahma is going to speak shortly, he says, some people say they all know all about Krishna, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't understand a thing. You're unlimited, and so forth and so on. Through bhakti we can understand something, and it's not like we can't go back to Godhead if we don't understand all of this, but understanding all of this will help get some picture of God, the source of everything, and to understand the greatness, infinite greatness of the personality of Godhead. Very, very significant. To know him is to love him, as they say. And it's nice to say love of God, but without knowing him, that love is not full yet. So the Bhagavatam is giving us these understandings, and it behooves us to try to understand and appreciate, as Brahma was appreciating, the superlative greatness of Krishna and the greatness of the residents of Vrindavan. Because that's the gift of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to awaken our Krishna prema as the residents of Vrindavan experience it. And this gives us some picture. Let's see if there's some discussion. Hope it wasn't too abstract or too lofty. I like to try to understand the Bhagavatam's message carefully. Anyone here in the room? And otherwise we'll see if there's some questions online. You have something, Vrindavan?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I think in the second canto, Prabhupada says that universal form is for the neophytes.
Could you turn the speaker this way so I can hear better? Which is what now?
In the second canto,
yeah.
Srila Prabhupada mentions that the universal form is for neophytes.
Yeah, we're neophytes.
But it's like it's more complicated to actually understand universal form. So how is it like?
Well, how do we understand Krishna's original form if we can't understand that which is for the neophytes? And the reason that we can't understand that which is for the neophytes is the senses are not purified. No, we can see. Let's say, go to the temple and see the deity, or in your home, you have right here. You have a deity. Are we seeing Krishna, or are we seeing something else? When we hear Bhagavad Gita, what are we hearing? When we chant the holy name. So the process for us starts with chanting and hearing, and chanting and hearing and chanting and hearing. So, but part of the hearing is significant. Before it gets to chapter 3 of Canto 2, it's chapter 1 of Canto 2, to help us form a personal conception of God. Because neophytes may not even have a personal conception of God. Or we may think we have a personal conception of God, but it's when we see the personal form of God, what are we seeing? So it's meant. It appears multiple times in the Bhagavatam. It appears multiple times in Mahabharata. There's a reason. So it will help us understand the personal form. If we can't see the world around us, because there are different descriptions of the Virat Rupa, if we can't see the way that Sadhaputta expresses it, I like. He says, the way we view the world has a profound effect on how we view ourselves. So there's the form of Krishna that's the source of everything, but then there's the world around us. And how do we view that world around us in relation to the source? Well, we can say Krishna is the source of everything. That's nice. How does it work? Sadhaputta shared with me his efforts to explain Vedic cosmology were compromised a whole bunch because before him, fundamentalist Christians were going through and speaking about God as the source of everything. But when the scientific community asked them questions, their bucket had holes in it, and they were just laughed at. So how to understand God as the source of everything, that's right, He is the source of everything. How does it work? How is it so for a person who's trained as scientists are trained? So, they're less than neophytes. They're, opposed to God, not just... So, how does it work? Sankhya is something that may help them, and Sankhya is the foundation for the Virat Rupa. So, supposing we don't understand Sankhya, we don't understand the Virat Rupa, can we make spiritual progress anyway? Definitely. And then when we come across these sections of the Virat Rupa and Sankhya philosophy, and we're scratching our heads, or fall asleep or something, because we're neophyte. So what are we going to understand about higher things if we can't understand these things? So it's there to help us become purified and have a better and a clearer understanding of how everything works and how there's a person behind everything. We have a very special sound system. It does that every now and then. Have I addressed your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
This is from Visalaksha Prabhu. Our spiritual senses are covered by material sense enjoyment due to not acting for the pleasure of Lord Krishna. Is it so purified? Material senses will act as spiritual senses?
What he's asking is, do our material senses become spiritualized or purified? That's what he's asking? Yes. That can be understood in different ways, including, incorrectly. So here's our sense organ. Here's an eyeball. And here's an earlobe. And it's not like the capacity, the eye has a capacity and the ear has a capacity to see and to hear in certain frequencies of light and certain frequencies of sound and so forth. But even when we hear, let's say, we hear Krishna's name or we see Krishna's deity form, we're not seeing Krishna because of the orientation of the senses reaching out to find enjoyment. And so we process things when we contact an object of sound or sight with the mind. That's our processor. And we don't have any experience of something that's not material. We don't have the orientation to be in service to Krishna. So when that in service to Krishna orientation can gradually be restored, then the senses develop a capacity to perceive in a spiritual way. We can hear the sound of Krishna's name. We can see the deity form, etc. We can see other living beings, not just our family members, but we can see all living beings as a spark of life covered in a certain way and meant for Krishna's service. And we can, in appropriate ways, relate to other forms of life as spirit souls, parts of Krishna. Because of spiritual vision, because of wanting to be in service to Krishna, all that becomes possible. That way the senses that were previously covered or materially contaminated can become spiritualized, even in this lifetime.
So the next question is from Sthira Mataji. Is the Virat Rupa mentioned today that the demigod saw same as that was mentioned in Bhagavad Gita chapter 11 that Arjuna saw? Are these both Virat Rupas same?
That's another class. But a short answer is there are different perspectives on the same thing. That's the short answer. What Arjuna saw, what Mother Jasoda saw, and what Brahma saw, the descriptions are different. They all saw. You read the descriptions carefully, and they didn't see the same thing. But it was the same thing, just with a different perspective or different disclosure by Krishna to what he wanted them to see or permitted them to see. That's what they saw. But it's the same Virat Rupa. And it's the same Virat Rupa being described here in the second canto, third canto, and fifth canto. Just described it from a different perspective, different aspects or features of it.
And this is Katamrita Mataji. Do the current...
She's laughing already.
Do the current residents or Vrajavasis in Vrindavan, today's world, also have spiritual senses?
To who do?
The current residents of Vrindavan.
The current residents of Vrindavan have spiritual senses.
Do they have spiritual senses?
If they're spiritually qualified, yes. And otherwise, no.
And Sanchari Mataji is asking, is there a reason why those specific demigods were chosen as the deities of the senses? Is there a reason why it is that specific sense for each demigod?
Well, the demigod is a post, and qualified people are placed in that post, and there's a function. And there's the reason, if she's asking, the particular living entity occupying that post has a particular qualification, the answer is yes. And if there's the question is, like say, the god of sun is presiding over the sense of sight. Is there a reason why he's the god of sun? Well, yeah, because without light you can't see. And so forth. So that there's the function to oversee the power of the senses being, effective. So yes, there's a reason.
This is Raghava Chaitanya Prabhu. I was not attentive on the slide that showed Patala, Pitraloka and hellish planets on the same level. So can you explain?
Yes, the artist ran out of space. I noticed that also. There's another flaw. And it's just an artist depiction. And so there's the 7 upper, 7 lower, and the bottom of the lower is Patala. And then there's the hellish planets below Patala. And there's some number of them, something, whatever the number is, 26 or some number of different hellish planets, and then Sukadeva Goswami says, but there's unlimited. But the space that it occupies is very little. It's kind of like compressed. And then the 7 lower, ending in Patala at the bottom, is less than the upper 7. The space between the upper 7 is also great. Is that clear? Okay.
And this is Shivaram Prabhu. My takeaway is that I now have an interest in learning more about the Virat Rupa of Krishna.
Good.
In order to purify my mind and intelligence.
Good.
Can you please comment on my takeaway?
You got it. And it's not easy. Be patient.
Sridevi Mataji is asking, is astrology based on these 11 presiding deities?
No. Astrology is based on, they have they're presiding deities of the senses, but astrology is primarily based on the zodiac, or the 12 main constellations through which the sun moves, and the nakshatras through which the moon moves. That's what it's mainly based upon. And it's complicated, but it can be it's part of the Vedic planetarium. It's part of Vedic cosmology. It's one of the things that Prabhupada wrote to Swarup Damodar Maharaj, saying, create this model that shows these things: the passage of day and night, the changing of the seasons. It's all in Vedic. It's in the 5th canto. It's not easy to extract that understanding. It's taken a while. It's taken a whole bunch of PhDs of a couple of decades to understand it. But that's what Vedic astronomy is, based upon those two: the movement of the sun through the zodiac, and the movement of the moon through the nakshatras, 27. The smaller constellation is the nakshatras, but with different names.
So this is Prahlad from St. Louis, Venu Prabhu's son. His question is, what does the name Brahma mean, and did Krishna give the name Brahma to him when he gave him the knowledge?
He didn't give him the name Brahma when he gave him the knowledge. And I forget the meaning of the name Brahma. Brahma. I read it recently, but I can't recall. But I'll research it, and tomorrow evening I'll report back to Prahlad.
There's
Prahlad is, how old is he? Maybe 6 or 7? Yeah.
This is from Rama Raghava Prabhu. I have a personal question. I have an inclination to the 4-armed form over the 2-armed form. Is this something that I should strive to change? Because
if it's natural, that's natural. That's fantastic. And understand that 4-armed form has its origin or source. But Krishna showed 4-armed form, Vasudeva and Devaki, and then he assumed a 2-armed form. Okay.
This is Amara Mataji. Is a neophyte's attraction to Krishna false? Since he can't even understand the universal form, so what to speak of personal form? How to understand this?
Well, it's similar to the previous question. Attraction for Krishna's form is, in the beginning, is in one sense it's natural, and in another sense it's not yet matured. That is to say, our mind and its senses are materially covered, and so whatever that attraction is today, when we have further purification, it'll the experience of attraction will be very different. But to be attracted, that's fantastic. It's just not matured. Keep going. Become a mature devotee. Become really attracted.
This is Atulya Mataji. Continuing with my question from yesterday about how Lord Brahma gained material and spiritual intelligence to create the universe. How do I get required material and spiritual intelligence to do my services and responsibilities? I feel insufficiency in my knowledge that's needed to carry out my duties properly and effectively.
Well, spiritual intelligence comes directly from Super Soul, and spiritual intelligence is given by Super Soul. We know from Bhagavad Gita, there's a qualification. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. So work on that, and you'll get spiritual intelligence. Or Super Soul is more likely to provide you with spiritual intelligence if you meet that qualification. He wants to give, we just have to qualify ourselves. And then material intelligence, that's just practice. You practice at something and you become accomplished at that something. The intelligence necessary to practice, to fulfill that something, it's come from practice. Like, driving a car or typing on a typewriter or cooking in the kitchen. There was a time when you didn't know, and your mother probably taught you, and you practiced and you learned. Just by practice. Just by practice. And it's especially, Prabhupada says about cooking, it's especially good if you like to taste. Then you become a better cook. And then, if you like others to taste something nice, so you cook nicely because you want to do that service nicely. And then you get into details. Like, what spices and what's healthy and this and that. Just like I'm doing this with the Bhagavatam because I like. And by practice and, so many years of practice, there are things that I appreciate about the Bhagavatam that when I first read the Bhagavatam, I didn't even see it. We all have that experience. You read Bhagavad Gita, and certain things stand out, and then you go back and read it the second time, and there's things you didn't even see the first time. You read it a third time, the things you didn't see this first and second time. So by practice, one becomes more capable of, with material intelligence, doing the things that you need to do. But what strengthens that is, I want to do it for the pleasure of Krishna, and then you're in the fast lane. That the learning capacity becomes strengthened.
This is Sandhya Mataji. How can we correlate Brahma being the creator with the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate characharam?
Because he's the secondary creator. More appropriately, he's the engineer.
She says, here Prakriti or material nature is represented by Parvati Devi. When we think of all moving and non-moving in nature, one would think Krishna is engaged always in the overseeing process.
Well, careful, because language terms can mean different things in different contexts. Yes, Durga refers to Prakriti, or Prakriti is Durga. But then there's other ways in which the word Prakriti is used, and so forth and so on. So be cautious about taking one application of a term and holding it for everything. It must be like this for everything because here's the correct meaning of the term. Sanskrit terms need to be understood sensitive to the context of their being used. So Prakriti in that case can mean something, and in another case it means something else. He, Brahma, was just taking the 24 elements that were provided, and here's the ingredients, here's the intelligence, here's the creative potency, the Shrishti Shakti, here's the blueprint. On your mark, get set, go, and he just did it. That's what engineers do. But engineers can't do anything without the ingredients and the plan and so forth, and the power, the capacity.
This is Padmaja Mataji. Oh, sorry, Arjun, Padmaja Mataji's son here in Nepal.
And how old is he?
He is 6.
He's 6. Okay.
Who gave Krishna his name? He asked because he knows Guru Maharaj gave him his name.
Well, Krishna's name is eternal, but he had a pastime. And he had a pastime where he took birth as the son of Nanda Maharaj. And so Nanda Maharaj gave him his name. But he has an eternal name. So we've been reading that section. Arjun should remember that Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill. It's a wonderful pastime. And after Krishna lifted Govardhan Hill, the residents of Vrindavan were going, wow, he's not an ordinary person, how could he do that? And not only that, he did other things, and so who is he? Nanda Maharaj, we look up to you, can you tell us who is he? Is he a demigod, or is he God, or he can't just be an ordinary living being can't do what he did. Who is he? So then Nanda very calmly says, at the time, the name-giving ceremony, Garga Muni spoke 8 verses. I'll refer you to those 8 verses and I'll tell you how I understand who Krishna is. So one of those verses, he gives names because it was a name-giving ceremony. So that's how he got his name, Nanda Maharaj. Garga Muni. But his name is eternal.
And we have Shari Mataji's question. Krishna showed the universal form to Arjuna in the middle of the Kurukshetra war. But in the slides it was shown that the universal form came from Garbhodaka ocean.
From?
Garbhodaka ocean.
I'll say it again. I'll probably have to say it a number of times. There are different depictions, different representations of the universal form. There's 3 categories. Remember that slide? There's one where it's seen. There's another that's described by authoritative sources. There's a third that's imaginary. So what we find in the Bhagavatam is this authoritative source. Canto 3, it's Kapila Dev. You can't get more authoritative. He's describing the Virat Rupa arose from the Garbhodaka ocean and the sequence of events preceding that. So that's another description that's found in this second category of universal form descriptions. It wasn't seen, it's just described by him. And it's the same universal form, just understood from a different perspective. Okay?
This is from Rajeshwari Pran Mataji. Maharaj, I like the structural, systematic, deep study of scriptures, but not finding time as much as I desire. Can you please give me some guidelines?
Do your best with the time that you have. If you have a desire, Krishna will help you. And you use your time well. You're a busy person, your mother, you're a professional, and you have sadhana, we have busy lives. But that means you have to do time management carefully, and it's doable. So with use your time well and you'll find the time.
And Govinda Mohini Mataji's question. What we have been hearing, all these messages seem way above my head. It's very humbling to know that our material intelligence doesn't work in comprehension of spiritual matter. Should I just be happy in hearing Krishna Katha?
Yes.
Or anything else?
This question she's asking was asked this morning, and I spent about 20 minutes. Was it this morning or yesterday morning? This morning? So listen to the recording of this morning's class, and you get a 20-minute answer. In detail, I mean, and some back and forth. It wasn't just one way.
This is Sri Radhika Mataji. Is it correct that the material senses cannot utter the holy name? And it's not in our striving, it is in our striving for chanting with purity that our senses will gradually be purified and we'll be able to chant?
Well, the pure holy name can't be recited by material senses. But let's just say we go on Harinam Sankirtan in the public and somebody out there is laughing. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. That's the holy name, but it's namabhas. Shobha, namabhas, laughing. So, but it's namabhas. It's not Shuddhanam, but it's the holy name, reflection of the holy name, shadow of the holy name. But yes, Shuddhanam requires purified senses. And we practice carefully chanting, and we can come to the stage of Shuddhanam, purified senses.
This is Sashireka Mataji. I've heard that by Guru and Krishna's mercy, one understands Shastra very well, including the universal form. I spend hours of time in studying Shastra and I feel very little goes in the mind. May I know how can I understand universal form and Sankhya philosophy easily?
Easily? I don't know an easily method. I know the patient method. And that's, hear it again and hear it again and hear from persons that are authoritative and have assimilated the knowledge carefully, and then you hear it again and hear it again.
So, Shri Radhika Mataji's follow-up question. What if death comes before that point?
What happened, what?
What if death comes before that point of Shuddhanam?
What if death comes? Then you'll either one of two things. You'll come back again and can pick up when you left off. That's one option. Or Krishna will just say, come on. Kripa Siddha. Or Sadhana Siddha. Yeah.
Arna, Ankita Mataji's daughter.
How old is she?
She is around 8 or 8 or 9.
8 or 9? Okay. See, there's only a few of us in the room and there's so many people. It's like, when technology works, it's good. It's good.
Her question is, if you're on a boat.
If you're on a boat.
And you don't have any food to eat.
Don't have any food to eat.
Can you eat fish?
Can you eat fish? Prabhupada speaks about this. And a short answer is yes. But you have to catch the fish. When there isn't something else, jivo jivasya jivanam, but when there is something else, then it's something else.
And this next question is from Radha Kunjabihari Prabhu. Devotees are required to shed their upadhis to realize their true identity, whereas Krishna loves to have relationships with devotees in different rasas, which requires the devotees to be immersed in an upadhi.
To be?
Immersed in an upadhi.
Why?
So he's requesting clarification.
I don't understand his question. They don't have to be immersed in a false designation in order to serve Krishna. Sorry. Maybe if he was here he could explain, but he can rephrase his question for tomorrow.
Then there is one more question from Rajeshwari Pran Mataji's question. If liberation of I want to get out of here is a material goal, even though trying to awaken the love of God and serve in whatever situation I'm put in, I feel it's a long way to go. What if many situations make me think I want to get out of here more than I want to serve? How to go beyond this material goal?
Associate with devotees that want to go beyond getting out of here. Associate with devotees that are carrying bhakti, and that bhakti will be transmitted to you. You associate with people, you develop qualities like those people. So associate with nice devotees. And hear, because by hearing and hearing and hearing, it's more attractive to be in your relationship with Krishna than just liberation, the cessation of material affairs.
There's a question from morning. Girish Prabhu asked, parental affection shown by Nanda Maharaj is very attractive. Those of us who worship Nrsingadev because we are attracted to him, can we ever experience different rasas like Sakya, Vatsalya and Madhurya?
Yeah, certainly. Those who are followers of Lord Chaitanya, there are a number of devotees I know, ISKCON devotees, who their favorite deity for worshipping is Lord Nrsingadev. Let's take Indradumna Maharaj. His favorite deity of worship is Lord Nrsingadev. Now he has very clear understanding of how Lord Nrsingadev fits into the hierarchy of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it's a long story, but a long story made short. If one worships Lord Nrsingadev with the understanding that the presiding principal Lord of all lords is Krishna, then Lord Nrsingadev takes on the mood of Krishna. And there's the special features of Lord Nrsingadev. They don't become whitewashed or, pablamized. But he conveys or transfers or passes on the same mood of love for Krishna that those who are worshipping the form of Krishna receive ultimately. But, yeah. There were devotees of Lord Chaitanya who weren't just Krishna bhaktas, but they were devotees of Lord Chaitanya, and he accepted them as much as anything. And so they have a place, those worshippers of, let's say, Murari Gupta, have a place in Lord Chaitanya's eternal abode, although he was a worshipper of Lord Ram. and not Lord Krishna? So the answer is yes. A lot depends upon correct understanding of Krishna being the source of everything, all the forms of the Lord appearing, just like it says in one of Brahma's prayers, earlier prayer. You're the source of the Leela avatars, you're the source of the Guna avatars, you're the source of everything. And by your appearance in these different features, you're attracting the hearts of the minds of the hearts and minds of the conditioned souls to the transcendental position, otherwise they wouldn't. So, that's it. One more? Two more. They keep coming, huh?
This is Panduranga Gopal Prabhu. Can any Deva or Devata give bhakti, or only Vaishnava like Shiva can give?
Well, someone who's carrying bhakti can give bhakti. You and I can give bhakti, carrying bhakti. Just carry bhakti, you can give it.
He's asking about other demigods other than Lord Shiva.
Well, Brahma, he gives bhakti. He gives other things too, depending.
This is Kasturi Manjari Mataji. At the sadhana stage, one practices devotional service in the mood of awe and reverence, following the do's and don'ts, avoiding the don'ts. It feels like the mood of awe and reverence hinders the closeness of a relationship. And Krishna can be conquered not by awe and reverence, but by pure love. How to resolve this conflict?
It's not a conflict. It's a stage of bhakti. We're not qualified to engage in service to Krishna in that greater intimacy because we're not sufficiently qualified, we're not purified. So the awe and reverence brings the purification, thus the qualification, and thus the natural evolution to something that's more spontaneous and personal, or spontaneous and intimate. Okay.
So Keshav Kishore Prabhu's question.
He's in Mayapur, stuck in Mayapur. Yeah. He lives in Chicago. Do you know him? Radha Swami disciple, elder, Hispanic.
Yes.
Yes. He's in Mayapur.
So he's asking about constriction of the heart. Sometimes it's hard to overcome some offenses one has committed. How or what to do to wash them from our mind if the chanting is not that effective?
Well, chanting is not less effective. It's the most effective. But if there's some offense, then the procedure, I know you know the procedure, you go to the person who has been offended. And if that's not possible for some reason, then you offer this prayer, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha. Prabhupada gave this instruction, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, and you, in your heart, your mind and your heart, you appeal to this devotee for forgiveness, and you carry on with the chanting and the process of devotional service. Now, if the specific question is the unhappy feeling or the feeling of guilt or whatever, the negative emotion being carried in the mind, how to deal with that? We have a price to pay for our mistakes or offenses, and that's part of the price you may have to pay. But it's not like, please take that bad feeling away, Krishna. Just please engage me always in your devotional service, that you go towards light and darkness will be dissipated. That's my advice. Regret is fine. Being just stuck in regret, that's mode of ignorance, and let it go. Go towards the light. Now, how about the family here? Anything that's churning? Anything at all? No?
This material elements and stuff is very hard to understand.
Yeah, Sankhya.
Sankhya philosophy. So probably we'll need more reading.
Well, I'll just go through very simply. The principle is Krishna is the source of everything, and he is unfolding his roadshow, the material roadshow. And it's subtle unfolds into more, the less subtle, the more grows and more grows and more grows, and then comes the whole thing. That's the elements. And with the elements means not only, earth, water, fire, or ether, but the sense and the object of the sense and the element. And then the demigod to oversee the function. So once the model is there, then there's the detail of the model. That's a little hard to follow. And the whole thing doesn't do anything unless Paramatma enters. And so at the right time, Paramatma enters, and then the whole show starts to move. But the elements, so there's the part that Vishnu does, that's Sarga. And then there's the part that Brahma does. Brahma takes what Vishnu does and starts assembling it. That's what engineers do. So Vishnu brings from the unmanifest to the manifest state, from the pradhan state to the mahatattva state to here's the big warehouse of everything ready to go. Brahma, go to it. Take the warehouse pieces and put them together and make a universe.
This pradhan, where does that come from?
It's eternal. It's just like this Prakriti question.
By the Siva.
It's Karnadakshay Vishnu, the Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu, has his consort, his Shakti. And her name is Rama. And she's never pictured outside because she's inside his internal potency and is enjoying pastimes with her within, called Yoga Nidra. And she, Rama, has her reflection potency. That's Pradhan. It's Chaya Devi, another name of Pradhan. The reflection. Mahavishnu glances over Pradhan, thinking, she wants something to do. She has nothing to do. She'd like some service. Somebody give her some service. He's just thinking. Rama understands, and Rama takes that glance and invests the glance with the totality of living entities that are within Mahavishnu. So what Pradhan is the undifferentiated totality of material energy, and it's not created, it's just describing a state, a condition of undifferentiation. The elements aren't differentiated, but by the glance they start to differentiate. Then it's give it a different name, Mahatattva. And then there's another name, Prakriti. It's just the same thing with a different nomenclature because it's a different stage. It's matter or with the modes of nature, because the modes of nature predominate over Prakriti. And Krishna oversees the modes of nature predominating over Prakriti. He's the remote control. So it's just unfolding, and then maintaining, and then withdrawing, and then back to Pradhan. The reflection of his internal potency. It's a very different picture. The picture that, your daughter is learning in school is very different than that one. Once upon a time, there was a singularity. Don't ask me where the singularity came from. They're just once upon a time. And then some time passed and kaboom! The singularity exploded. And hot matter went flying through space and gradually started to cool down and form planets. One of them is this one. That's how it all began. Kaboom! The Big Bang. It's a different picture of things. So what's the basis and support for that idea? I was once at IGSA, Indian Graduate Student Association gathering at the University of Houston. And the venue was like a theater, like a lecture hall, with the seats that go up like this, and the speaker is down here. So I was the speaker down there, and there's like all these very brilliant, Indian graduate students, and the topic was mysteries of the sacred universe. I was describing Sariputta's work, and slow motion, taking it apart, holding up this, holding up that. This fits together with that, and so at the end, one of the persons said, according to theoretical physics, we can describe everything down to a few milliseconds before the Big Bang. And then another one said, and what happens after the Big Bang, there's two ideas. One of those two ideas is, at a certain point, the mass just keeps expanding and expanding, and it no longer can hold the gravitational field, and it just dissipates into nothingness. And then there's a second model, it's just theoretical physics. There's another model that says it implodes back upon itself and goes back into a singularity. and then a third person said, I forget his name, a celebrated Harvard professor, scientist professor that did talk shows on TV, I forget his name, says he likes the second model. And he happened to like the Vedas a lot, because he said the Vedas picture time as cyclical. Because Einstein also spoke about time, space, continuum, and all that. So, once Prabhupada was asked, is there anything comparable to the Big Bang in Vedic text? So he asked, what's Big Bang? And somebody explained. And he said that the only thing that this isn't verbatim what he said, but something to the effect that it sounds like the universe is expanding from the body of Mahavishnu. They start as seeds, and then they grew. So, not to say it's a one-to-one correlation or anything like that, just the model is quite different. So what I said to the students after they did that little 1, 2, 3, I said, so here's this Vedic picture that gives empiric data that has very, very close correlation with the modern picture of astronomy. And one of them says it either starts with nothing and goes back to nothing, or goes into nothingness. So this is a model that has very similar numeric qualities, empiric data, but it starts with a person, and it ends with a person, and in between it's person. So if you have your model, then what's the meaning to life? Doesn't matter. It starts in nothing and ends in nothing. What's in between? Life is pretty meaningless and very impersonal. So it's not like that doesn't prove it's right or wrong. It's just like it's much more inviting picture. But then, when you get with people like that, they're going to ask, well, what about this and what about that? So Sankhya gives the details of this and that. And it's non-falsifiable. You know that terminology, right? The Bhaktivedanta Institute folks in Berkeley, over a period of years, they developed a relationship with a professor, a physics professor that had earned or was awarded a Nobel laureate prize in physics. So they gave him a paid sabbatical to go to Juhu. His name is Professor Henry Stapp, S-T-A-P-H. You can look it up later. And he studied for a month and a half Sankhya philosophy from third canto. He was a very intense guy. He was up before the devotees were up. He was at the balcony looking over at Mangal Arati every morning. It was up till, he's like a cerebral powerhouse. And he spent a month and a half, and his conclusion was, there's nothing falsifiable from anything that I know in empiric science to say it can't be. Doesn't prove it's right. But it's a picture that's a comprehensive picture of reality that explains lots of things. That's different. There's a different model than, mechanistic, atheistic science. He's not a Hare Krishna guy. He's a scientist, but he has appreciation for the message. I wish I could remember the name of that Harvard professor. I came across his talk sometime recently. Yeah, Carl Sagan. Oh, Carl Sagan. Very good. Thanks, Keshav Kishore. So how about you? You have any? Not at all. Is it way over your head? Forget it, man. Anything that you think that you've learned about Brahma that you like sticks?
I think he does the same thing as Krishna. Maybe not. He's a very good God, and he protects people, same as Krishna.
He does what to people?
He keeps people safe.
He keeps people safe.
Yes.
Safe. Brahma.
No, but Krishna does.
Okay. It's good to feel protected. Just like this little boy. When I came in, he was cleaning. He likes to clean?
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Just for fun, not the real one.
Okay. He looked like he was into it. He was like too busy cleaning to say Hari Bol. He's happy, playful and happy. Okay, thank you very much. Prabhupada ki Jai.